Welcome to Thursday. Is it Thursday?
It's Thursday.
Did you all get to go to how many of you went to NCRA? Anybody there this last week?
I think a few of us. Let's see, 4 people on this meeting, and then you as well.
Awesome. Yeah. It was such a great conference. I've got to say, I've been to 3 conferences in the last, in the last 2 weeks, and I love this one.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
All right, that's what I wanted to show you. So let me go to, let's go from the beginning. Pull that up so you guys can see it. All right, so everybody's able to see that? So I have,
yes,
you can see the bright orange. I figured
yes,
I'd throw the bright orange up so everybody can see it. You've got the link.
Yep.
The link is in the chat, but you guys are welcome to snapshot it as well. I'm not going to be very formal, but I did want to put up sort of the contact info from the start so that you'd be able to see it and be able to reach out later. My workshop notes are there, and also the book list that I used is there, but I want to be able to sort of keep this kind of mellow. I realize you guys have all been working like crazy all day, and so you don't need me to be a talking head at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we'll have fun instead. It would really help me before we get started if I can just get a sense of who's in the room in terms of what grades you all teach. So if you teach, let's say, kindergarten through 2nd grade, can you do a thumbs up in your corner? Or somehow, all right, I see a few. How about 3rd through 5th? All right, anybody higher than 5th grade? All right, so I want to kind of focus today on the concept of connection. And I want to focus on, I was telling Amanda this before we got on the call. When I'm at NCRA, I'm focusing on the idea of connecting science to literacy, because you're all coming at things from a language arts point of view. I just went to Grandfather Mountain, where I was working with a bunch of science teachers, trying to help them understand how to connect literacy to science. And so what I want to talk about today is sort of connection and the natural marriage that the two can have. And I wanted to start by showing you guys, a couple of weeks ago, I was in West Virginia, and I was working with a group of 3rd graders, and I wanted to share just briefly this video to show you how it looks when it comes together, and then talk about some practical strategies we can use. So hopefully the sound is going to work.
We're having an amazing
Can you guys hear that?
Here at Warm Springs Elementary. I am here bringing science of Iceland together with my journeys to Australia and Antarctica, and we are exploring animal classifications. We are looking at habitats, we are looking at biomes, and I can't wait for you to see the amazing things these kids are coming up with.
So we started with literature connections, and you can see there are a ton of books. They then moved to classification, had to use persuasion. They got to then take on a STEM challenge where they had to.
So what are we making here?
Basically, let me pause for a minute so I can give you the background. So we started out talking about different habitats. I showed them examples from Australia, from Iceland, from Antarctica, and from West Virginia. I wanted them to be able to compare and contrast the different habitats. From there, we actually talked about the needs that all these different, they had to then sort. And so we talked about different ways you could sort something. Do you do it by location? Do you do it by how many legs they have? Do you do it by whether it's a mammal or a reptile? So they were sorting and classifying. I guided them initially. We did some scaffolding, and then in their groups, they looked at the headers and decided what was most appropriate. So they had to use logical reasoning. They had to use communication, persuasion to convince each other. From there, once they had mastered the idea of how do you sort, how do you build vocabulary, How do you understand the different ways that you can look at something? We talked about what all animals need. And we talked about, you need air, you need food, you need water, you need shelter. They then had a STEM challenge where they had to use their 21st century learning skills. They had to collaborate. They had to use creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, all of that together. They had to basically design a habitat for a penguin. So we were bringing penguins to West Virginia, and we had already established that penguins needed a very different habitat than West Virginia. And so what I want you to watch is the communication that went on during this part, the design process of what they had to do, the way that they had to take all the elements that they had learned to be able to apply it in this challenge.
Side. First, this one. I got it, baby. So this is a pool. This is the spot that's a pit we have. I don't have a little that's gonna go right there. And I was thinking about we could put more than one big little. They could make it like a longer tower.
Wait, say that again. And who are we keeping cold in there? Ooh.
We're gonna write. Everybody's gonna name the penguins and we're gonna write them on here and paste it on the side.
I love the idea of insulation.
Okay. This is the door. This is the insulation to keep the
Okay.
because we're in West Virginia, it's kind of warm right now. In here, this is the food. There's a pond in there with some sand, some rocks. This is the nest. We have a phone for a pillow, and that penguin's swimming. And we have construction paper for the water.
Hold on.
And lots and lots of sand and rocks. Yeah. And this is the bridge where they can cross. And this is the stairs how they can get up and like have this little go fight. So like this is like there's two beds inside and there's like this little apartment. These are like having some fish. The fish, some of the fish are in the pond, and I make little pebbles because I know that penguins like to build their nests with pebbles. This is a pea for penguin that he's to me, so that it's like marking their little hole. So we put little blocks on the floor, and we're making like a little system. And this is where they get water. This is the mountain, and here's their house.
So I see shelter, I see water, where's her food?
Here.
So you can see in that first part, they were really applying all the things that we had talked about that morning. They used, it was literally a bunch of junk I was able to bring in, toilet paper tubes. I have plastic penguins. It was foam insulation, just random stuff. But they were able to take it and repurpose it and really apply it as they thought through what does a penguin need to survive in West Virginia. I particularly like the little girl who was like, and we need insulation because it's hot here. So after lunch, when they came back, the next challenges was to build it into a language arts connection. And so they were able to do it in a very specific collaborative way. This then took it to the individual level. And they had to design their own animal. They used the books that I had around the room for inspiration. And their animal had to meet at least 3 of the different classifications we had done today. So they could decide whether it was a carnivore or herbivore. They might have decided land animal, water animal. So they fur, feathers, tails, all of those different things. And then they had to be able to answer the questions in writing about where their animal lived, how their animal moved, what did it eat, did anything eat their animal, and what else is special about their animals. So we were really taking it from the hands-on to now you're going to create an animal yourself. And all I brought in was Play-Doh and some simple stuff for them to work with so they could create it with their fingers and then write it out. And this is what they came up with.
That is fabulous. The crew?
Yeah. Diane.
So you can see that we've got our animals, we've got the writing that's going with it. They really, what was very cool about it is they went back and they looked at the books and they thought, ooh, I really like this lyra bird from Australia, but I also really like this snake from the desert. How do I put those together? And so there was a lot of really good thinking about how do we mix and match. They talked to each other about what they were doing. And it was a really cool writing activity. They then had a class museum. So they were able to walk around and see what everybody else had created and be able to talk about it. So we were, again, using all of those 21st century skills, but we were applying it to our reading and writing. These guys are expert animal classifiers. They are zoologists, and they have created an entire habitat for penguins as well as their very own animals. Hey guys, was it a best day ever? Yes. So the reason I share that is to show you what's possible when we're able to connect language arts and science. I think that language arts teachers are some of the most amazing humans I know, and you really have the opportunity to do some absolutely cool things. I'm going to stop this so you guys can see me better. So I want to be able to show you some different ways that you can build those connections, introduce you to a couple of books, a couple of ideas, and then you're going to have the slide deck, which goes more in depth, and you're welcome to use that and go through it and get some ideas from that. And then reach out to me because I'm always happy to talk and share. So what I wanted to share with you is the concept of building connections, because that was what was all about that. How many of you have seen an energy stick? Anybody seen one of these? So, yep, I figured you have, Amanda, because you were in my workshop last year. So I love these. I actually use them with the book Patchwork, and I'm looking to see if I have my book with, yes, I do. Hang on. All right. Do you guys know the book Patchwork by Matt De La Pena and Karina Lukin? I love this book. He's the one who did Last Stop on Market Street. And what I love about this book is as you're going through it, each child, basically, how many of you have been asked that question? What do you want to be when you grow up? It's a terrible question. I have a daughter who's graduating college right now, and if you ask her that question, it will send her into a nervous anxiety attack. Because graduation's coming up. It's hard because often we find we've got kids who, by the time they're in, say, third grade, their parents are going, "Oh, look, you're a superstar soccer player. You must just be a soccer player." Or, "Look, you're good at Legos. You must be the STEM kid." And it doesn't recognize sort of all the myriad possibilities that a child has, as well as the idea that just because you're one thing at the age of 8 doesn't mean that's what you're going to be forever. And if you don't know what you're going to be at the age of 8, that doesn't mean you're going to be a loser for life either. And so it's sort of, this book looks at that and basically looks at what you are as a child, but then the possibilities as you get older. And so, like, one of the pages I really love, you've got the little girl in the tutu. "You were put on the earth to dance. We know, we know. Ballet, tap, hip hop, your body bending to the beat, leaping from note to note, dipping into demi-plie. You dream in 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But those rhythms inside your head are also a kind of math. And one day you will discover coding and change the way the world moves." And then you've got like the basketball player who's a poet. I like this one only because we all have this child in our class. "You are the kid perpetually in timeout. We sigh, we sigh. You shove and cut lines and talk over teachers. You tell jokes during the pledge and your whole body buzzes when you get a reaction." I know none of you have that student in your classes this year, right? "But the skill it takes to make people laugh is the skill you'll use to help people learn when you become a favorite teacher. And when a restless kid like you lands in the back of your class, you will see her, you will love her." And so it goes on. And then at the very end, You are more than a single note played again and again. You are a symphony. You are sounds plucked from all the places you've been and all the people you've met and all the feelings you've felt. You are blues and pinks and loneliness and laughter, mismatched scraps accumulated over time and stitched together into a kind of patchwork. And even when your pattern loses its design, when it grows lopsided or tangles or is hard to follow, it will be beautiful. We are beautiful. And so I use this book a couple of different ways. One, it's a great book for back to school night when you've got the families in. It's a good one to read to the adults to get them to think about how to support their kids. But I've also used it with kids where at the beginning of the year, I have them draw themselves. And, you know, depending on the age of the kid, you can have them write a little something about themselves. With really young ones, because I started with preschoolers, it would give me a real good sense of where they were in terms of being able to write their name. Are we grounding things? Do we have a sense of top, bottom? Do we have a sense of space? What details are we adding? And then we would put it together in a quilt and tape it together just with masking tape. I would take a picture of it. And then at the end of the year, we would do it again. And it's a really good portfolio assessment to be able to compare and show progress from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, because every kid made some progress, you know, and it's a different way of defining it than a standardized test, but it's a really good way to see, oh, look at the details you're adding, or look how you changed between the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So it was a really lovely way to build connection. I want to show you some of what those can look like. Back to the PowerPoint. So let me go to the end here. Sorry. So you can see what the quilt could look like. And as they're building this quilt, you know, especially with older kids, you can have them think about, how do you shape it? How do you put your patches together? With kids who are, say, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I like to make it even more complicated and give them 3 Post-it notes. And on those 3 Post-it notes, have them do one that's, think back to when you were a little kid in preschool. What did you want to be when you were in preschool? They love that, because if you're 10, preschool's half a lifetime away. It's 5 years ago. That's half your life. So have them think about what they were in preschool, then have them think about who they are right now. What do they love to do? And then you can ask them, and what do you think you want to do someday? You know, and it may be just a hope for the future. Maybe what they hope is that they get to ride a roller coaster. You know, the future can be tomorrow. But then to have them work together to shape it. So you're doing the arts in STEAM because you're having to think and design. We're doing engineering because you have to figure out, okay, how do I put these blocks together? How do mine fit with yours? Do we want to go 5 across and 5 down? You know, how are we going to put them together? So you're getting some computational thinking in there as well. And they're able to sort of create and build their thing. So then that's when I introduce the energy stick. And this is where I'm going to make myself bigger so you guys can see it. So with the energy stick, what I'll do is I will bring up a willing victim. And I usually try to find the kid who's going to have a good sense of humor about it. And I'm going to say, you know, I've been doing some work with Steve Spangler, and he sent me these really cool things, and I don't know how to use them. You think you can figure it out? Because I've been shaking it and nothing's happening. And so I'll hand it to the kid, and the kid's going to hold it for a few minutes, and eventually they're going to put both hands on it. And when they do, it lights up. And often they'll jump because they're not sure what's going on with that. And we'll play with it a little bit. I'm like, oh, how'd you do that? What did you do? And the whole class is getting in on the action. And they're like, oh, look, you held both hands together. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like, I wonder how else we could do it. And so then I might bring up 2 friends and say, how about, do you think it would work with 2 of you? And so bring up somebody else, and they'll stand here like this, and one might hold it, and they, you know, they might be like trying to hold it together. So like, Angela, I might be handing it to you, and you're reaching out and grabbing the other end. But if we're not fulfilling the circuit, it's not going to do anything. Eventually, they're going to figure out, oh, we have to touch hands or touch skin. And they're going to figure out, oh, we could do this with 2 people. And then somebody's going to get the idea. I'm like, oh, wow, well, 2. Okay, I guess that works. And then they're going to be like, oh, we can do it with more. I'm like, oh, I've never seen it work with any more than, say, like 4. And they're like, oh, we can do it with more. And eventually they get the whole class in on it. So you basically are taking on the role of egging them on. You don't have to know the science that goes behind it, but it's really just completing a circuit. So oops, I dropped my spoon. So they're taking on that, and I'm like, okay, that's really cool. And they figure out they can, if everybody in the room is holding on, you can do this. And if somebody lets go, you're like a switch. And then I'll be like, okay, well, what happens if between the person who's holding this end and the next person, I give you a spoon and I give you a metal spoon? And I'm gonna have to do this a slightly trickier way. So I'm not touching my hand to it any longer. I'm touching the metal spoon to it. And they're like, ooh, metal conducts. So they're starting to figure out conductor and insulator. And then, and I dropped my other spoon. Sorry, there it is. Apologize for ducking out. I'll give them a different spoon. Okay, that worked. What if I give you a wooden spoon? What's going to happen? So we try it with a wooden spoon. And you can see that with the wooden spoon, nothing's happening, right? Because wood is an insulator. So then be like, well, what could we do to make the wood conduct? So some kid's going to think, get it wet. And I don't have water on me right now, but I will tell you, if you were to dip the spoon in water, it will work. But another kid's going to go, well, what if we wrap foil around? And so I just happen to have a spoon wrapped in foil and it works. So then I talk about, well, you know, we're able to conduct, we're able to do insulating. So then I will give them a bag filled with random stuff. And in my bag, they're going to get things like pipe cleaners or chenille sticks, a little aluminum foil, a paper towel, some cups, and I just use my recycled Play-Doh cups, popsicle sticks, silverware, plastic and regular. And then I would have some water and let them put a little water in the cup as well. Working together again, because we're going to do collaboration, we're going to work together. I'll give them an energy stick and they've got to work together to come up with a working circuit. And let me show you what that's going to look like, since I don't happen to have children with me right now. So you can see as they're building that they're working on creating a circuit. You can use alligator clips as well. But it's a really fun way to get them to collaborate, to use critical thinking, to use problem solving. And as they're doing it, they're going to start talking and they're going to start using those science words of conductor and insulator and open and closed circuit. So they're building these connections. And when they're done building those connections, then you can bring it back to the books and you can talk about how what we just did is we created an experience where we had to connect all of these things to be able to build a circuit, just like when we held the energy stick together in the room. And so then you can start talking about the idea of how we build connection with each other. So it allows you to have a deeper conversation with them. And some of the books I really love, in addition to Patchwork, The Invisible Boy by Trudy Ludwig is a great book for that, especially if you're thinking about social emotional learning, you're thinking about kids feeling left out and needing the power of connection. The Day You Begin is another really good one. If you want to be a little more literal in terms of steam challenge and electricity, The Dark by Lemony Snicket is a great one where they have to problem solve and figure out how to help the kid who's afraid of the dark. Tiny T-Rex in the Very Dark Dark is another really good one for that. But it's a really neat way to be able to use a hands-on activity that doesn't take a whole lot of materials as a way to jump into the idea of connection. And from there, you could do all kinds of things in terms of having them write, in terms of having them, you know, maybe you do a poem about connection and about friendship. You know, there are different ways that you could take it and go with it. So it's just kind of a really fun way that you can use this concept of connection. So that's one I really like doing. Another one that I have grown to really love recently, and since Earth Day is coming up, it's a nice one to think about, is the concept of footprints and what kind of footprint we leave. And that's keeping again with the idea of connection. This book, Footprints Across the Planet, is by Jennifer Swanson. Does anybody know her work? She has written about 50 nonfiction books that you've probably run into at one point or another in your classroom. She did like Crash Test Dummies. She's done just a variety of those, Astronaut, Aquanaut. But this is my favorite book that she's done. And the reason I love Footprints Across the Planet is the photos are just absolutely beautiful, and it really ties into that concept of connection. And so I'm going to show you just a little bit of the book. You can see what kind of footprint do you think this one is? You've got your elephant, right? And footprints come in all shapes and sizes, colors, and species. Some are large and deep, strong and purposeful. Others are small and shallow, barely leaving any imprint at all. Some have toes, while others have hooves, paws, claws, or talons. Footprints can be difficult to spot or seem so common we barely notice them at all. Footprints are also as diverse as the people on the planet. And so you can talk about what kind of footprint do you make. It's a great chance to stop and have a conversation about the shoes you wear, the footprints you leave. Then it goes deeper. It starts talking about they capture adventure at the greatest heights. And so you can see the footprints we leave as we're climbing mountains. And deep under the sea. So you can see the footprints that we leave when we're in, the bubbles and that kind of a footprint. Footprints reveal our past. What kid doesn't love dinosaurs? And give us a glimpse of the future. And so if you're doing something like Jasmine Warga's A Rover's Story, nice tie into Mars. Some footprints last forever, marking historic moments. And others disappear in a moment. And so for those of you at the beach, you all know about the footprints that you make in the sand. Footprints represent people who stood up for change. And I like the idea that we're taking the historic people. You've got Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., you've got Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and also those who strive to follow them. And you've got kids who are standing up for climate change and climate action. You've got Greta Thunberg. Then I love this. They hint at new technology that could change how we live. So we leave a digital footprint, another way that we leave a footprint, while reminding us that our way of living impacts everything around us. So suddenly you've got the idea of pollution and plastic and the litter that we leave. Footprints can't always be seen, but are traces of ourselves left wherever we go and whatever we do. Every footprint leaves a mark on the earth, telling a story of the past, the present, or the future. What type of mark will you leave behind? And then in the back, you've got back matter that describes each of the pages and gives you some history and some facts about each of them. And so you could then take this and you could have the kids like trace their own footprint, and you could have them talk about, the story of what they want their footprint to leave. So they could think about where their footprint would go. What kind of connection do they want? You could also use this as a way to consider standard and non-standard forms of measurement. So when we think about standard forms of measurement, what are we thinking? We're thinking about rulers, right? We're thinking about tape measures, yardsticks, things like that. And then with non-standard measurement, it could be their own feet, because their feet are not exactly 12 inches. So you could take their little footprints and measure across the room. When I had my preschoolers, dinosaurs, I referenced that what preschooler doesn't love dinosaurs. So we would literally tape out across the room. 33 feet was a Stegosaurus, 80 to 100 feet was an Apatosaurus. And so I would run masking tape across my floor. That meant nothing to the 4-year-olds until we used non-standard measurement and we started measuring in the form of a preschooler, and they laid head to toe. And so suddenly it was really cool to go, oh, it takes 10 preschoolers to equal one Stegosaurus, or it takes 15 of us to equal an Apatosaurus. We actually talked about circumference and diameter because a T-Rex's mouth was five feet wide. And so if you tape that out on a floor and you do the circle, how many preschoolers can you get into a T-Rex's mouth? I can guarantee you every year we got 33 kids and 2 teachers. You just squish really close together, but everybody wanted to be eaten by a T-Rex. Preschoolers are a little weird that way. And so that would be one way, but then another thing you can do with kids I collect stuffed animals. I have them to go with habitats and things like that. And so you can have them come up with different ways to measure things. Can you come up with at least 2 or 3 different ways to measure your bear? And so they might choose to do it using, maybe they use chenille sticks. Maybe they use little plastic pigs. Amanda, you probably still have your plastic pig from my workshop last year. Maybe they use blocks. They might use, I've had teachers pick up their cell phones and go, it takes 1, 2 cell phones to equal the bear. But you get them to start thinking about different ways to measure. Again, it's opening them up to perspective taking. And so as you start thinking about different perspectives and different ways of doing things, that's something that can translate into your writing. It can translate into your reading and your vocabulary as well. So sometimes just taking a book, connecting it to science, connecting it to math lets you flip back and bring it right on back to writing, but it gives you a whole fresh new way to do it. So does anybody have any questions for me? I know I've talked a lot and I wanted to sort of just open it up for some brainstorming, see if there were any things you guys wanted to talk about or ask about.
Diane, can you give a reminder about, there was one you did when I came and saw you and it involved like an umbrella bag. It wasn't an umbrella bag, but you had said that we could use
Yes.
and I couldn't remember the story behind it. Would you mind sharing that?
I'm going to grab it right now. Hang on. The good news about where I'm sitting is I have access to all of my stuff. So when I do the 3 Little Pigs, how many of you have used the 3 Little Pigs at some point with your kids? I love it because it really opens up to being able to have a conversation about air pressure. You can talk about wind. You can talk about weather. Because what do we know? Who's the villain in most versions of the 3 Little Pigs? It's our wolf, right? And he huffs and he puffs and he blows the house down. So Steve Spangler sells these wind bags. You can also use diaper genie bags. And as I tell every conference that I go to, raid the umbrella bags that are at the hotel as well. Just don't tell them I told you to do that. But what you do, again, you get your unwilling victim. And kids are pretty good about this. When you roll the bag out, it's about 8 feet long. And so what I'll do is I'll get my volunteer and I do help them out. I tie a hole in the bag or a knot in the bag first. I'll be like, okay, how many breaths do you think it's going to take to blow up this bag? And they'll make some guesses and I'll have the person do 5 breaths. And you and I know that you never put your mouth on the bag, but we let them do it the first time because this is how I'm setting it up, because I'm going to show them something, sort of a discrepant event. And so they'll put their mouth on the bag and we'll count. And they'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'll catch it and I'll slide it down. And let's say they have this much. So we'll start estimating 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Oh my goodness, it's going to take you 50 breaths to be able to do this. So I'll be like, well, I would never ask you to do anything I'm not willing to do. And so I'll have a friend hold it up. And the trick is you've got to hold the bag up at a distance. So I'm going to have to stand and hold mine over here for a minute. Okay. So it's going to be, you want to hold it out. I'm going to angle so you guys can see me. And what I don't tell the kids, sorry, this is a little challenging without a partner. Give me 1 second. I'm going to slide over here and make sure that's good. All right. So the other person is going to be sitting and they're going to be continuing to huff and puff like this. You're going to hold it with both hands out like this. And you want to have it straight out. You're not going to blow into the bag. And you're going to send 1 breath down. Catch the bag like this immediately. And suddenly you're going to have it completely blown up. And the person behind you is going to still be puffing and you're going to mess with them. You'll be like, what is taking you so long? How come you can't do this? And so then you'll let all your air out. You'll do it again. The kids in the meanwhile are going to be watching you and they're going to be watching the other person because you're back to back. So the other person can't see you. And as they're watching, they're figuring it out. They're like, wait, you need to hold your hands way out away from your face. You need to open the bag. Take your mouth off of it. You need to blow in. what they're learning is Bernoulli's principle. It's the same principle that goes into flight. You're basically pulling the air from around the bag, and as you're blowing, you're sending all of that air into the bag. And it's a really cool way to get them to understand the concept of Bernoulli's principle. And I can show you, because I do have some pictures of some other stuff you guys can do with that. It's this one. Let me back up for a minute because I want to be able to show it to you. All right, there we go. So if you've read The Three Little Wolves and the Big Bad Pig, it's a great one to do with them, because in that version of the Three Little Pigs story, the wolves are trying to escape from the big bad pig, and they keep building with bigger and heftier materials, and the pig is blowing them up. And it's when they finally use air, basically flowers and air, that the pig inhales the beautiful smell and they become friends. And so I talk about the idea of using air to build a house. And so the challenge is then the kids have to blow up their windbags, and then working in teams, they have to build a house, and set a time limit, but it needs to have like 4 walls and a roof, and it needs to stand up on its own. And so you give them that challenge, you give them rubber bands, and they have to collaborate. And again, you're going to use your engineering process, because they're going to have to design, they're going to have to test, they're going to prototype it, they're going to fail, and that's okay, because then you're going to have them go back and figure it out and do it again. But it's a really fun way to harness the concept of air pressure in construction. Some other things you can do, and I'm glad you brought that up, Amanda, is the Three Pigs also really lend themselves to a discussion about habitat, because it's one of those stories that there are so many different versions of it. And you've got versions that take place in the ocean, in the desert, in the savannah, in the bayou. And so just using the Three Pigs, you can compare and contrast all these different habitats and use it as a springboard to study biomes, which leads us back to the original animal activity I did with the kids earlier. So you could tie all of that stuff together. Other questions?
And if anyone has questions, you can either put it in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So my primary classroom experience was in K3, and now I'm a school librarian and have a K5 situation. K3, they eat it up, but my 4th and 5th graders sometimes, they're too cool for everything, or they start to have some behavior problems. How do you manage that with activities like this, or what types of things? How do you modify to make it cool for the big kids?
So one of the things I've found with the big kids is that they need these hands-on experiences as much as the little guys do. And so if you can turn it into a challenge, and I'm not above saying what you're doing is like, there are 8th graders who can't do this. So throw the middle school under the bus, because when you can do things like that, you're sort of raising that level, and suddenly they're like, ooh, I'm doing something 8th graders doing. That's so cool. So you'll say, I saw this challenge on Steve Spangler, or I saw this challenge that, was being done on TikTok. Actually, TikTok is not a bad thing to bring up with that age range either. And I was wondering, do you think we could do it? Can we beat this record? Can we try to do this better than they did it? So when you can add that element of, we're going to improve on something somebody else did, or we're going to innovate, that might help with that. I also really believe strongly in picture books for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade and above, because I think that so many of the picture books are actually more sophisticated than K3 to begin with, and they're really good mentor texts. And there's so many well-written ones, both in nonfiction and in fiction, that it helps to level the playing field a little bit too, in terms of reading, and especially in a library situation. You can use it and be able to share the book, and then hopefully get them intrigued and let them go explore some as well. Anybody else?
doesn't sound like it, but Diane, I am so appreciative of you hopping on with us today. And I think you're going to send out some stuff that if people are interested in getting with you about coming to their school or about other workshops, you're gonna pass that along to us, right?
So in your notes, in the thing I shared with you, I wanted to just share 3 options you've got. One, I'm working with a partner and we're doing a short online video course. Basically, we celebrated 100 days now what, which is going to be filled with 5 ideas to get you through the end of the school year. Fun lesson ideas. So that's one, and you get a discount for it. The other is the author Jennifer Swanson I was just talking about. She and I are partnering to do some special stuff over the next year where we're going to come together to do professional development at your, like we're willing to come together to do professional development at your school, but also to potentially provide an author visit and a STEM enrichment day for your school. So it's a new partnership we're trying out, and you'll have the link to that if you want to learn more about it. And then finally, working with Steve Spangler, I've created a fairy tale STEAM course. It's a 3-hour professional development course that comes with a 50-page PDF with ideas and things that you can do. And with this code, you basically save $25 off the cost of the course. So it brings it down to a really reasonable price. So I'm offering all of that to you guys. And of course, I'm always happy to travel and do professional development. I love to come work with kids and grownups. And I can do things, via virtual or in person. I love North Carolina. I grew up in North Carolina. So any excuse I get to come home to North Carolina, I gladly take. So hopefully that will all be useful to you. And, please reach out. I would love to be able to just answer questions or help you out with anything you need.